Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he pushed his cleaning cart down the pristine white corridors of the Galactic Research Station Omega-7. The station floated in the void between star systems, a monument to interspecies cooperation and scientific advancement. To most of the universe, it represented the pinnacle of civilization. To Marcus, it was just another place that needed cleaning. He had been working as a janitor on the station for 3 years now. While brilliant alien minds from across the galaxy studied ancient artifacts, developed new technologies, and made groundbreaking discoveries, Marcus emptied trash bins and mopped floors. He didn't mind the work. It was honest, and it paid enough to support his sick mother back on Earth. Besides, the aliens largely ignored him, which suited Marcus just fine. The station housed researchers from dozens of species. The tall, crystalline Vorthak conducted their experiments in complete silence, their thoughts transmitted through light frequencies. The aquatic Nereids worked in specialized water-filled laboratories, their tentacles dancing as they manipulated complex holographic displays. The insectoid Hivari moved in perfect coordination, their collective consciousness allowing them to complete tasks with remarkable efficiency. Marcus had learned to navigate around all of them. He knew which corridors to avoid during Vorthak meditation hours, when the Nereid labs would be flooding their chambers for deep-water research, and how to clean around Hivari work clusters without disrupting their delicate synchronization. After 3 years, he had become practically invisible to most of the station's inhabitants. That invisibility ended on a Tuesday. Marcus was cleaning the waste disposal unit in Section 7 when the alarms began blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the corridor as an automated voice announced in 17 different languages that all personnel should report to emergency stations. Marcus had heard these drills before, but something felt different this time. The voice carried an edge of genuine panic. He abandoned his cart and jogged toward the main assembly hall, curiosity getting the better of him. The massive chamber was filled with beings from across the galaxy, all talking in hushed, urgent tones. At the center of the room stood Dr. Xelith, the station commander, her blue Arctarian skin pale with worry. "Citizens of the galaxy," Dr. Xelith began, her translation device carrying her words to every species present. "We have received a transmission from the Outer Rim. The message is unprecedented." A holographic display activated above the crowd. The image showed a massive shape moving through space, easily the size of a small moon. But this was no celestial body. The creature was organic, covered in scales that seemed to absorb starlight, with wings that stretched across kilometers. Ancient eyes, larger than starships, gazed out from a head that bore the unmistakable characteristics of a dragon. Gasps echoed throughout the assembly hall. Even Marcus, who knew little about galactic history, recognized the significance of what he was seeing. Dragons were myths, legends told to children across 100 worlds. Yet here was proof that at least one was very real. "This is Zephyrian the Eternal," Dr. Xelith continued. "According to our historical databases, he is over 50,000 years old. He has not been seen or heard from in over 2 millennia. The message he sent was brief, but its implications are staggering." The dragon's voice filled the chamber, deep and resonant, like the rumble of distant thunder. When it spoke, Marcus felt the words in his bones. "People of the younger races," the dragon said, "I am dying. After 50,000 years of existence, my time in this universe draws to a close. I have one final request before I pass into the great beyond. I seek an audience with the human who speaks my name. Bring him to me, for I have something that must be given before I depart this realm." Silence filled the assembly hall. Marcus watched as hundreds of alien faces turned toward him and the handful of other humans on the station. The weight of their stare pressed down on him like a physical force. Dr. Xelith cleared her throat. The dragon provided coordinates to a location in the outer rim. However, we face a significant problem. None of our databases contain any record of this dragon's true name. Without it, we cannot determine which human he seeks. A Vorthak researcher stepped forward, its crystalline body chiming as it moved. Commander, perhaps the dragon's name exists in the ancient archives on Kelthera Prime. We could send a research team. That would take months, replied a Nereid scientist, water dripping from her tentacles. The dragon appeared to be in considerable distress. I doubt we have that kind of time. Marcus found himself stepping forward before he realized what he was doing. The crowd parted as he moved toward the center of the chamber, and he felt every eye in the room following his progress. "Excuse me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Zeleth looked down at him with surprise. "Yes? You are Marcus Chen, one of our sanitation engineers, correct?" Marcus nodded, feeling his cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Yes, ma'am. I was wondering, what exactly did the dragon look like? I mean, beyond just being a dragon." Dr. Zeleth frowned. "I'm not sure I understand the relevance of your question, Mr. Chen. It's just that—" Marcus took a deep breath. "My grandmother used to tell me stories when I was little, stories about dragons and magic and ancient powers. I always thought they were just fairy tales, but the way you described this Zephyrian, it sounds familiar." A murmur ran through the crowd. Dr. Zeleth activated the holographic display again, showing the dragon in greater detail. Marcus studied the image carefully, noting the distinctive pattern of scales along the creature's neck, the way its horns curved backward like a crown, the deep golden color of its eyes. "The stories my grandmother told," Marcus continued, his voice gaining confidence, "they were about a dragon named Zephyrian the Stormcaller. She said he was the guardian of the wind and sky, the keeper of storms and the bringer of change. According to her stories, he once saved Earth from a great catastrophe, long before humans ever reached the stars." The chamber erupted in excited chatter. Dr. Zeleth raised a hand for silence. "Mr. Chen, these stories your grandmother told you, do you remember them in detail?" Marcus nodded slowly. "She made me memorize them, said they were important, that they carried truth even if they seemed like fantasy. I can recite every word if you need me to." "That won't be necessary," Dr. Zeleth said. "But I am curious about one thing. In these stories, was there ever mention of how one might properly address this dragon?" Marcus closed his eyes, remembering his grandmother's voice as she tucked him into bed on countless nights. Her words came back to him as clearly as if she were standing beside him. She said that Zephyrian had many names, but only one true name that held power over wind and storm. She called him Zephyrian Etherwing, master of the celestial winds, guardian of the sky roads. The moment the words left his lips, something extraordinary happened. The air in the chamber began to move, swirling in gentle currents that seemed to respond to some unseen force. The lights flickered, and several sensitive instruments on the walls began beeping frantically. Dr. Zeleth's eyes widened. "Mr. Chen, I believe you may have just spoken the dragon's true name." "But that's impossible," Marcus protested. "I'm just a janitor. These were just stories my grandmother told me." "Perhaps," said Dr. Zeleth, "your grandmother knew more than you realized." The station's communication array suddenly crackled to life. The dragon's voice filled the chamber once again, but this time it carried a note of surprise and something that might have been joy. "The one who knows my true name has spoken," Zephyrian said. "I feel the resonance of my power in his words. Bring him to me, young seeker of truth. Time grows short, and what I must give cannot wait for the stars to align again." All eyes turned to Marcus. He felt his knees go weak as the magnitude of the situation crashed down on him. A creature of legend, older than human civilization itself, was specifically requesting his presence. Marcus Chen, who had spent his life cleaning up after others, was apparently the key to fulfilling an ancient dragon's dying wish. Dr. Zelith placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Chen, I know this must be overwhelming. You're under no obligation to accept this request. The journey to the Outer Rim is dangerous, and we have no way of knowing what the dragon truly wants." Marcus looked around the chamber at all the brilliant minds gathered there. Researchers who had spent their entire lives studying the mysteries of the universe, diplomats who negotiated treaties between star systems, scientists who had unlocked the secrets of faster-than-light travel. And yet, for some inexplicable reason, it was his knowledge that was needed. "What happens if I don't go?" Marcus asked. Dr. Zelith considered the question carefully. "The dragon dies with his request unfulfilled. Whatever knowledge or gift he intended to pass on will be lost forever." "And if I do go?" "Unknown, but based on the legends surrounding dragons, it could be something that changes the course of galactic history." Marcus thought about his grandmother. About all those nights she had filled his head with impossible stories of magic and wonder. She had always insisted that the tales were more than just entertainment, that they carried deeper truths about the universe and humanity's place in it. At the time, he had assumed it was just an old woman's fancy. Now he wondered if she had been preparing him for this moment his entire life. "I'll go," Marcus said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "If this dragon needs to see me, then I guess I need to see him too." The chamber erupted in applause from dozens of different species. Dr. Salith smiled and nodded approvingly. "Very well, Mr. Chen. We'll prepare the fastest ship we have for immediate departure. Given the urgency of the dragon's condition, we estimate it will take approximately 48 hours to reach the coordinates he provided." As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Captain Yarix, the station's military liaison, standing behind him. The grizzled draconian's scarred face bore an expression of grudging respect. "Human," Captain Yarix rumbled in his deep voice, "I have fought in 17 major conflicts across this galaxy. I have seen warriors face down impossible odds and diplomats negotiate peace in the face of certain war. But what you just did, accepting a call from an ancient dragon based on childhood stories, that takes a different kind of courage." Marcus shrugged, still not entirely believing what he had committed to. "I just figure if my grandmother's stories brought me this far, maybe they'll see me through whatever comes next." Captain Yarix chuckled, a sound like grinding stone. "Perhaps they will. I'll be commanding the escort ship for your journey. If this dragon truly is dying, we want to make sure you reach him safely." As Marcus walked back to his abandoned cleaning cart, his mind raced with questions. How had his grandmother known about a dragon that the galaxy's most advanced databases couldn't identify? What was it that Zephyrian wanted to give him? And why did he, of all people, have to be the one to receive it? He spent the next 2 hours mechanically going through his cleaning routine while his thoughts churned. By the time his shift ended, word had spread throughout the station. Everywhere he went, beings stopped their important work to stare at him. Some looked curious, others skeptical, and a few seemed genuinely awed. In his small quarters, Marcus packed what few belongings he thought he might need for the journey. As he folded his clothes, he found himself reciting the old stories his grandmother had told him, searching for any clues about what might await him in the Outer Rim. According to the tales, Zephyrian had lived through the rise and fall of countless civilizations. He had witnessed the birth of stars and the death of worlds. The stories spoke of his vast wisdom, his ability to see through the currents of time itself. But they also hinted at a great sadness, a burden that the dragon had carried for millennia. Marcus tried to imagine meeting such a being face to face. What did one say to a creature that had existed since before humanity discovered fire? How did a simple janitor from Earth interact with a legendary guardian of storms? A soft chime from his door interrupted his thoughts. Marcus opened it to find Dr. Zelith standing in the corridor, holding a data pad. "I wanted to give you these before you departed," she said, handing him the device. "We've compiled everything our databases contain about dragon lore from across the galaxy. It isn't much, but it might help you understand what you're walking into." Marcus accepted the pad gratefully. "Thank you, Doctor. Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you really think my grandmother knew something the rest of the galaxy didn't?" Dr. Zelith was quiet for a long moment. "Mr. Chen, in my 40 years of research, I've learned that wisdom often comes from the most unexpected sources. Your grandmother may not have had advanced degrees or access to sophisticated technology, but she preserved knowledge that our most powerful computers couldn't access. That suggests she was part of something much larger than we currently understand." The thought sent a chill down Marcus's spine. "You think there are others? Other humans who know these stories?" "I think," Dr. Zelith said carefully, "that you're about to discover your species has a much more complex relationship with the ancient powers of this universe than anyone realized, and I suspect your journey to meet Zephyrian is only the beginning." After she left, Marcus spent hours reading through the datapad. Most of the entries were fragmentary, references to dragons in the mythologies of dozens of different worlds. But there were patterns. Similarities that suggested these weren't just random legends. Many cultures spoke of dragons as bridges between the mortal realm and something greater, guardians of knowledge that transcended normal understanding. One entry, from the archives of a long-dead civilization called the Eternals, caught his attention. The great worms serve as keepers of the deep truths, those laws that govern not just matter and energy, but the very fabric of existence itself. When the time comes for the universe to remember what it has forgotten, they will choose their inheritors from among those who still carry the old words. Marcus read the passage 3 times, feeling a growing certainty that his grandmother's stories were somehow connected to this ancient prophecy. She had made him memorize those tales for a reason, had insisted they were important even when he was too young to understand why. As he prepared for sleep, Marcus found himself wondering if she had somehow known that this day would come. Had she spent her life preparing him to answer a dragon's call? The thought seemed impossible. But then again, 24 hours ago, the existence of dragons had seemed impossible too. His dreams that night were filled with visions of vast creatures soaring between the stars, their voices echoing across the void with words of power and wisdom. When he woke the next morning, Marcus felt changed in some fundamental way, as if accepting the dragon's summons had awakened something that had been sleeping within him his entire life. The ship that would carry him to the outer rim was called the Starhawk, a sleek vessel designed for speed and equipped with the latest in defensive systems. Captain Yarix met him at the boarding dock, along with a small crew of volunteers from various species. "We'll reach the coordinates in 36 hours, the captain informed him as they settled into the ship's acceleration couches. "Try to rest during the journey. Meeting an ancient dragon is going to require all your strength." As the Starhawk launched from the station and jumped to faster-than-light speed, Marcus pressed his face to the viewport and watched the stars streak past. Somewhere ahead of them, Zephyrian the Eternal waited with his final gift. Whatever it was, Marcus knew that his life would never be the same again. The simple janitor who had spent 3 years invisibly cleaning the galaxy's most advanced research station was about to become something else entirely. He just hoped his grandmother's stories had prepared him for whatever that something would be. The journey to the outer rim took exactly 35 hours and 14 minutes. Marcus spent most of that time studying the datapad Dr. Zelith had given him, searching for any additional clues about what awaited him. The more he read, the more convinced he became that dragons were far more than just powerful creatures. They seem to be living repositories of cosmic knowledge, guardians of secrets that predated galactic civilization itself. Captain Yarix found him in the ship's small observation deck during the final approach, staring out at the swirling nebula that marked their destination. "Second thoughts, human?" the Draconian asked, settling his massive frame into a reinforced chair. Marcus shook his head. "Just trying to understand what I'm walking into. These stories my grandmother told me, they're starting to feel less like fairy tales and more like instruction manuals." "Perhaps they were both," Captain Yarix suggested. "In my culture, we believe that the most important truths are often hidden in the most innocent packages. A story told to a child might carry more weight than 1,000 academic papers." The ship's intercom crackled to life. "All personnel, we're approaching the coordinates. Visual contact with the target in 3 minutes." Marcus and Captain Yarix moved to the bridge, where the crew was already gathered around the main display screen. The nebula ahead of them pulsed with unusual colors, deep purples and golds that seemed to shift and flow like liquid light. "There," whispered the Nereid navigator, pointing a tentacle at the screen, bearing 27 Mark 6. At first, Marcus saw only a dark shape against the nebula's glow. Then the ship's cameras adjusted their focus, and he gasped. Zephyrian the Eternal hung motionless in space, his massive form clearly visible even at their current distance. The dragon appeared to be resting on what looked like a crystalline platform that extended from the heart of the nebula itself. "By the 7 suns," Captain Yarix breathed. "He's magnificent." Magnificent was an understatement. Even at this distance, Zephyrian's presence was overwhelming. His scales caught and reflected the nebula's light, creating patterns of color that seemed to pulse with their own inner rhythm. His wings, folded against his sides, still spanned several kilometers. When he turned his great head toward their approaching ship, his eyes blazed like golden suns. The communication array activated without any input from the crew. Zephyrian's voice filled the bridge, and Marcus felt that same bone-deep resonance he had experienced back on the station. "Welcome, young seekers," the dragon said. "I have been waiting. Human Marcus Chen, you carry the old words within you. Come to me, that we might speak of things that were and things that must be." Marcus felt every eye on the bridge turn toward him. His mouth was dry, and his hands trembled slightly as he stepped forward to the communications console. "Lord Zephyrian," he said, hoping he was using the proper form of address, "I'm honored by your summons, though I confess I don't understand why you've called for me specifically." A sound that might have been laughter rumbled through the speakers. "Understanding will come, young keeper of stories, for now it is enough that you have answered. Captain of the escort vessel, bring your ship to dock with the platform. Do not fear for your safety. This place exists outside the normal flow of space and time." As they approached the crystalline platform, Marcus could see that it was covered in symbols and patterns that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. The platform's surface was large enough to accommodate their ship with room to spare, and when they touched down, the landing felt softer than it should have given the apparent hardness of the crystal. That platform, the ship's engineer, a brilliant Hivari collective named Unity of Purpose, announced with obvious amazement, "It's not made of any material in our databases. The energy readings are impossible." Captain Yarix stood and checked his weapon. "A small security detail will accompany you, Marcus, just as a precaution." "No," Marcus said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "I think this is something I need to do alone. Besides, I don't think conventional weapons would be much help if an ancient dragon decided to harm us." After a moment's hesitation, Captain Yarix nodded. "Your choice, but we'll be monitoring the situation from here." Marcus made his way to the airlock, pausing only to grab an environmental suit. To his surprise, when he stepped onto the platform, he found that the atmosphere was perfectly breathable. The air carried strange scents, like ozone after a thunderstorm mixed with something that reminded him of his grandmother's garden. Zephyrian lay stretched across the far end of the platform, his great head resting on his foreclaws. Up close, the dragon was even more magnificent than Marcus had imagined. His scales seemed to contain entire galaxies, swirling patterns of light that hinted at vast depths of power. When their eyes met, Marcus felt as though he was looking into the heart of eternity itself. "Approach, Marcus Chen," Zephyrian said, his voice now gentle and warm. "Do not fear. I have called you here not to harm, but to give." Marcus walked across the crystalline surface, his footsteps echoing strangely in the space between worlds. When he reached the dragon, he stopped and performed what he hoped was a respectful bow. "Lord Zephyrian Etherwing, master of the celestial winds, guardian of the sky roads," he said, reciting the full title his grandmother had taught him. "I am here, as you requested." The dragon's eyes widened slightly. "You speak the old words with perfect pronunciation. Your grandmother taught you well, young Marcus. Tell me, do you know who she was?" Marcus frowned. "She was Eleanor Chen. She raised me after my parents died in a transport accident. She worked as a librarian on Earth, specializing in folklore and mythology. Why do you ask?" "Because," Zephyrian said, lowering his great head until he was eye-level with Marcus, "Eleanor Chen was one of the last keepers of the ancient compact. She was charged with preserving certain knowledge until the time came for it to be passed on. That time, it seems, is now." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "I don't understand. My grandmother never mentioned any compact or special knowledge. She just told me stories." "The most powerful spells often masquerade as simple tales," Zephyrian replied. "Your grandmother spent her life ensuring that you would be ready for this moment. Every story she told you, every word she made you memorize, was preparation for what I must now give you." The dragon lifted his head and breathed softly onto the crystalline platform. Where his breath touched the surface, new symbols appeared, glowing with soft golden light. Marcus watched in amazement as the symbols formed into recognizable shapes and patterns. "These are the true words," Zephyrian explained. "The language that was spoken when the universe was young, before matter and energy learned to dance separately. Your species calls it magic, but it is simply knowledge of the deeper laws that govern reality itself." Marcus stared at the symbols. As he watched, they began to make sense, as if his brain was automatically translating them into concepts he could understand. He saw patterns that described the relationship between thought and matter, formulas that explained how consciousness could influence the fundamental forces of physics. "Why are you giving this to me?" Marcus asked. "I'm nobody special, just a janitor from Earth." "You are far more than that," Zephyrian said. "You are the inheritor of a legacy that spans 50,000 years. Your grandmother was one of many humans who carried fragments of this knowledge, waiting for the day when it would be needed again. That day has arrived." The dragon extended one massive claw and gently touched Marcus's forehead. Immediately, Marcus's mind exploded with information. He saw the history of the universe from a perspective no human had ever experienced, witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations across countless star systems, understood the true relationship between the various species that now shared the galaxy. But most importantly, he saw the coming crisis. A darkness was spreading across the outer edge of the galaxy, something that consumed not just matter and energy, but the very concepts that gave them meaning. It was a force of pure negation, an entity that sought to return the universe to the primordial void from which it had emerged. The various galactic civilizations were completely unaware of its existence, but it was growing stronger with each passing day. "The silence," Zephyrian said, reading his thoughts. "It has slept for millions of years, but something has awakened it. Traditional weapons and technology are useless against it. Only the true words have the power to hold it back, and only those who carry the old blood can speak them with sufficient force. Marcus stumbled backward, overwhelmed by the visions flooding his mind. But why humans? Why not the Vorthak or the Nereids? They're more advanced than we are. Because, Zephyrian replied, humanity carries within its genetic code the echo of the first speakers, those who originally crafted the true words. Other species evolved along different paths, developing great intelligence and technological prowess, but losing the ability to channel the fundamental forces directly. Humans retained that capacity, though it has been dormant for millennia. The dragon turned his attention to the crystalline platform, and Marcus watched as more symbols appeared. These were different from the first set, more complex and somehow alive. They seemed to pulse with their own inner light, and looking at them made Marcus's head spin. These are the binding words, Zephyrian explained. They have the power to contain the silence, but only if spoken by one who has been properly prepared. Your grandmother began that preparation when you were a child. I am completing it now. Marcus felt something changing inside him, as if dormant pathways in his brain were suddenly coming alive. He could sense the energy that flowed through the crystalline platform, could feel the vast currents of power that moved between the stars. It was overwhelming and terrifying and wonderful, all at once. There's more, Zephyrian continued. The knowledge I'm giving you will spread to others of your species, those who carry the proper genetic markers. They will begin to remember the old stories, will feel the call to seek out the ancient places of power. You must find them, train them, prepare them for what is coming. How will I know who they are? Marcus asked. You will know, the dragon assured him. The true words recognize their own. When you speak them in the presence of those who can learn, they will respond. Some will be powerful enough to stand with you against the silence. Others will serve as teachers and guides for the next generation. Marcus looked out at the nebula surrounding them, trying to process the magnitude of what he was being told. The weight of responsibility was staggering. The fate of the entire galaxy might depend on his ability to find and train others like himself. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, he admitted. Zephyrian's expression softened. Your grandmother thought the same thing when she was first chosen as a keeper. Yet she spent her entire life faithfully preserving the knowledge that has brought you to this moment. Strength is not about never feeling fear or doubt. It is about continuing forward despite those feelings. The dragon lifted his great head and gazed out at the stars beyond the nebula. My time grows short. The knowledge I have given you is all I can spare. The rest must remain with me when I pass, for there are some secrets too dangerous to trust to mortal minds. Marcus felt a sudden panic. Wait, you're leaving. What am I supposed to do? How do I find the others? How do I learn to use this power properly? Trust in the stories, Zephyrian said simply. Your grandmother gave you more than just knowledge. She gave you the wisdom to know how to use it. The true words will guide you to those who need to hear them, and they will teach you as much as you teach them. The dragon began to glow, his scales taking on a luminescence that rivaled the nebula itself. It is time for me to join the great flight, to take my place among the stars as my predecessors did before me. But before I go, I have one final gift. Zephyrian reached out with his claw again, this time touching Marcus's chest directly over his heart. Marcus gasped as he felt something settle into place inside him, a presence that was both foreign and completely natural. I have given you a fragment of my essence, the dragon explained. It will help you channel the true words and protect you from the silence when you inevitably face it. More importantly, it will ensure that the knowledge is never completely lost. Even if you fall, others will carry on the work. Marcus felt tears streaming down his cheeks, though he wasn't sure if they were from sadness or overwhelming gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered. "I'll do my best to honor your trust." "I know you will," Zephyrian replied. "Now go. Return to your people and begin the work." The silence stirs, and time grows short. The dragon's form began to fade, becoming translucent like morning mist. As he dissolved, his voice echoed one final time across the crystalline platform. "Remember Marcus Chen, grandson of Eleanor the Keeper. You are not just a janitor from Earth. You are the bridge between worlds, the speaker of the true words, the one who will kindle the light that holds back the darkness. Your story begins now." With that, Zephyrian was gone. The crystalline platform began to dissolve beneath Marcus's feet, and he ran back toward the ship as the strange space between worlds collapsed around them. Captain Yarix and the crew were waiting for him in the airlock, their faces filled with concern and curiosity. "Marcus!" Captain Yarix called as he pulled him inside. "What happened? We lost visual contact for nearly an hour, but you were only gone for 10 minutes. Marcus looked back through the viewport as they launched from the collapsing platform. The nebula was fading, its impossible colors dimming as normal space reasserted itself. In a few moments, there would be no sign that anything unusual had ever existed in this region. "Time moves differently around dragons," Marcus said quietly, "and I have a lot to tell you." As the Starhawk jumped back to faster-than-light speed, Marcus settled into his acceleration couch and tried to organize his thoughts. He carried within him now the accumulated wisdom of 50,000 years, the power to reshape reality with properly spoken words, and the terrible knowledge of the darkness that was coming for them all. But more than that, he carried the memory of his grandmother's gentle voice, telling him stories on quiet evenings, preparing him for a destiny she had never fully explained, but had always known he would one day face. Eleanor Chen had been far more than just a librarian who specialized in folklore. She had been a guardian of humanity's greatest secret, and now that guardianship had passed to him. Marcus closed his eyes and felt the true words stirring in his mind, ready to be spoken when the time was right. Somewhere out there, other humans were beginning to remember fragments of ancient stories, were feeling the pull of something they didn't yet understand. His job was to find them, teach them, and prepare them for the war that was coming. The simple janitor who had boarded this ship was gone forever. In his place sat Marcus Chen, the bridge between worlds, keeper of the ancient knowledge and humanity's last hope against the encroaching darkness. The real work was about to begin. 6 months had passed since Marcus's encounter with Zephyrian, and the galaxy was beginning to change in ways that most beings couldn't yet perceive. On the surface, everything appeared normal. Trade continued between star systems, researchers published their findings, and diplomats negotiated treaties. But underneath the veneer of civilization, something ancient was stirring. Marcus stood on the observation deck of Research Station Omega-7, no longer wearing the uniform of a janitor. Instead, he wore the simple gray robes that had become the unofficial attire of the growing organization he now led. The true words had guided him to 17 other humans so far, scattered across dozens of worlds. Each one had carried fragments of old stories, half-remembered lullabies or family legends that contained pieces of the ancient knowledge. "Sir?" A young voice interrupted his thoughts. Marcus turned to see David Kim, a former mining engineer from the asteroid colonies who had been the third person to respond to the call. The true words had awakened something in David that allowed him to manipulate gravitational fields with nothing more than properly spoken syllables. "What is it, David?" "We're receiving reports from the Outer Rim monitoring stations. The readings are unusual." Marcus followed David to the communication center that had been hastily converted from a storage bay. The small room buzzed with activity as humans and aliens worked side by side, tracking disturbances across the galaxy. Dr. Zelith stood at the central console, her blue skin pale with concern. "Marcus, thank goodness you're here," she said. "We're detecting massive energy fluctuations along the galactic rim. Entire star systems are simply disappearing." The main display showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with red zones marking the affected areas. Marcus felt his blood chill as he recognized the pattern. It was exactly what Zephyrian had shown him in his visions of the silence. "How many systems have we lost?" Marcus asked. 47 in the past week," replied Commander Thex, a draconian military leader who had volunteered to coordinate their defenses. "The pattern is accelerating. At this rate, the disturbance will reach inhabited space within months." Marcus studied the display, letting the true words guide his understanding. He could see the flow of the darkness, the way it consumed not just matter and energy, but the very concepts that gave them meaning. Stars didn't just die when the silence touched them. They simply ceased to have ever existed. "Has anyone tried to investigate these disappearances directly?" Marcus asked. Dr. Zelith nodded grimly. "The Vorthak sent a deep space probe to the edge of the affected zone 3 days ago. The probe transmitted for exactly 47 seconds before all contact was lost. When we tried to trace its signal, we found nothing. Not destroyed, not damaged. Simply gone, as if it had never been built." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. The silence was more aggressive than Zephyrian had anticipated, or perhaps something had accelerated its awakening. Either way, they were running out of time. "Gather the speakers," Marcus commanded. "All of them. If we're going to have any chance of stopping this, we need to act now." Within hours, 18 humans had assembled in what had once been the station's main conference room. They came from all walks of life: former miners, teachers, merchants, soldiers, and artists. The only thing they had in common was their ability to speak the true words and channel the ancient power that flowed through them. Marcus looked around the room at faces he had come to know well over the past months. Sarah Martinez, a former teacher who could heal injuries with spoken formulas. Jin Watanabe, an artist whose paintings could actually alter local reality. Rebecca O'Connor, a demolitions expert who had learned to create force barriers that could withstand starship weapons. Each of them had answered the call when the true words awakened in their minds. Each had left behind their old lives to join what historians would later call the Last Covenant, though they didn't know that name yet. "You've all seen the reports," Marcus began. "The silence is moving faster than we expected. Traditional defenses are useless against it. We're the only ones who stand between it and everything we hold dear." "But we're just 18 people," protested Miguel Santos, a former merchant marine whose specialty was manipulating electromagnetic fields. "How can we possibly stand against something that's consuming entire star systems?" Marcus felt the fragment of Zephyrian's essence stir within him, lending strength to his words. "Because we carry the echo of the first speakers, the ones who originally bound the silence at the dawn of creation. We have the tools our ancestors used. We just need to learn how to use them properly." He moved to the center of the room and began to speak in the true language. The words that emerged from his lips were unlike anything in common galactic speech, syllables that seemed to resonate with the fundamental frequencies of reality itself. As he spoke, symbols appeared in the air around him, golden letters that pulsed with their own inner light. The assembled speakers gasped as they felt the power flowing through the room. Some of them began to understand fragments of what Marcus was saying, their own connection to the ancient language strengthening as they listened. "This is the ceremony of binding," Marcus explained, switching back to standard galactic common. "It's designed to create a barrier that the silence cannot cross, but it requires all of us working together, and it requires us to anchor it at specific points throughout the galaxy." Rebecca raised her hand. You're talking about spreading ourselves across multiple star systems. If something goes wrong, if the ceremony fails, we die, Marcus said simply. All of us. And the silence consumes everything we've tried to protect. But if we don't try, the outcome is exactly the same, only delayed by a few months. The room fell silent as the speakers absorbed the magnitude of what they were facing. These were not soldiers trained for suicide missions or mystics prepared for martyrdom. They were ordinary people who had discovered extraordinary abilities and now found themselves responsible for the survival of galactic civilization. Jin spoke up from the back of the room. "What do you need us to do?" Marcus activated a holographic display showing the galactic map. 18 points of light appeared at strategic locations throughout inhabited space, forming a complex geometric pattern that extended from the core worlds to the edge of the outer rim. "These are the anchor points," he explained. "Ancient sites where the first speakers originally performed the binding that created our universe. Most civilizations consider them archaeological curiosities or natural phenomena. We know better." Dr. Zelith, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward. "Marcus, some of these locations are in disputed territories or war zones. Getting our people there safely will be nearly impossible." "Then we'll make it possible," Commander Thex rumbled from his position near the wall. "The military leaders of 17 different species have pledged their support to this mission. They may not understand exactly what you're doing, but they recognize the threat the silence represents." Marcus nodded gratefully. Over the past months, he had worked tirelessly to convince the galaxy's leaders that the threat was real. Most still didn't fully understand what they were facing, but the undeniable evidence of vanishing star systems had finally gotten their attention. "Each anchor point will require one speaker to activate it," Marcus continued. "The process is dangerous. You'll be channeling more power than any of us have ever attempted before. Some of you may not survive the experience." Sarah stepped forward, her healer's training making her naturally protective of others. "Is there any way to reduce the risk? Some kind of preparation we can do?" Marcus wished he could offer more hope, but Zephyrian's memories were clear on this point. The ceremony of binding requires willing sacrifice from those who perform it. The first speakers understood this when they created the original barriers. They gave their lives to birth the universe as we know it. We may have to do the same to preserve it. The weight of silence filled the room as each speaker contemplated what they were being asked to do. These were not the trained heroes of ancient legends or the battle-hardened warriors of military campaigns. They were ordinary people who had discovered they carried within them the power to reshape reality itself. Miguel was the first to speak. "My wife and children live on New Barcelona. If the silence reaches them—" He straightened his shoulders. "Tell me where you need me to go." One by one, the others voiced their agreement. Rebecca would take the anchor point in the draconian military sector. Jin would handle the artistic colony worlds of the Terran Federation. Sarah would go to the medical research stations near the galactic core, where her healing abilities would be most needed during the evacuation. Marcus felt a surge of pride and terror as he watched these remarkable people volunteer for what might be a suicide mission. They understood the stakes, understood that failure meant the end of everything, and they were still willing to take the risk. "There's one more thing," Marcus said quietly. "The final anchor point, the one at the center of the pattern, requires the most power. Whoever takes it will almost certainly not survive the activation." The room fell silent again. Everyone understood what he was really saying. "I'll take it," he continued. "Zephyrian gave me the strongest connection to the true words, and his essence is still with me. If anyone has a chance of surviving long enough to complete the ceremony, it's me." "No," Sarah protested. "You're the only one who fully understands what we're doing. If something goes wrong, if we need guidance during the ceremony, then you'll have to figure it out yourselves," Marcus replied. The true words will guide you. Trust in them and trust in each other. Over the next 48 hours, the galaxy's remaining military forces worked frantically to transport the speakers to their assigned anchor points. Each group was given a small escort of volunteers from various species, beings who understood they were participating in something that would determine the fate of everything they had ever known. Marcus's destination was a seemingly empty region of space near the galactic center, where ancient records indicated the presence of what the first speakers had called the heart of all things. As his ship approached the coordinates, sensors detected a massive structure hidden within what appeared to be empty vacuum. "Incredible," whispered the ship's Nereid navigator. "It's perfectly camouflaged. If we didn't know exactly where to look." The structure that emerged from its concealment was unlike anything in the known galaxy. It appeared to be made from crystallized space itself, walls of solidified vacuum that bent light around them in impossible ways. At its center stood a platform similar to the one where Marcus had met Zephyrian, but far larger and more complex. "This is it," Marcus said as they docked with the structure. "The first anchor point. If the records are accurate, this is where the universe as we know it actually began." As he prepared to leave the ship, Marcus felt the weight of everything that had led to this moment. 6 months ago, he had been a simple janitor, invisible to the galaxy's important people, content to clean up after others and send money home to his mother. Now he stood ready to speak words that would either save civilization or watch it die trying. His communicator crackled with incoming messages from the other anchor points. One by one, the speakers reported that they had reached their destinations and were beginning the preliminary rituals. The pattern was taking shape across the galaxy, 18 points of light preparing to speak the words that would bind the silence once more. "Marcus," came Sarah's voice over the comm. "We're detecting massive disturbances from the edge of the galaxy. The silence is moving faster than projected. We estimate 6 hours before it reaches the first inhabited systems." "Then we begin now," Marcus replied. "All speakers, initiate your portions of the ceremony. Remember, the words must be spoken in perfect synchronization. If even one of us falls out of rhythm, the binding will fail." As he stepped onto the crystalline platform, Marcus felt the true words rising in his mind. Syllables of power that had not been spoken since the dawn of creation. Around him, space itself began to respond, reality bending and flowing as the ancient forces awakened. Across the galaxy, 17 other voices joined his, speaking words in a language older than starlight. The anchor points blazed with golden fire as the speakers channeled power that no mortal mind was meant to contain. Several of them cried out as the energy burned through them, but their voices never faltered. Marcus felt Zephyrian's essence blazing within him as he spoke the final words of the ceremony. The platform beneath his feet cracked and shattered as forces beyond comprehension flowed through his human frame. He could feel his body beginning to fail, but the words continued to pour from his lips. At the edge of the galaxy, the silence crashed against barriers of crystallized thought and found its advance halted for the first time in eons. The consuming darkness raged against the binding, testing each link in the chain of power that held it back. One by one, the speakers at the outer anchor points fell silent as their bodies failed under the strain. But their sacrifice was not in vain. The barriers held. The pattern remained intact. The silence was contained. Marcus felt his vision beginning to fade as the final words of power left his lips. But through his failing senses, he could perceive something wonderful. The true words were spreading, awakening in the minds of humans across the galaxy. The knowledge was no longer limited to 18 people. It was becoming part of humanity's collective consciousness, ensuring that future generations would remember this day and be prepared if the silence ever stirred again. As consciousness left him, Marcus heard his grandmother's voice one final time, speaking words of comfort and pride. "Well done, my dear boy," Eleanor Chen whispered across the void between life and death. "You have honored our ancient trust." When rescue teams reached the anchor points 3 days later, they found the surviving speakers exhausted but alive, surrounded by the shattered remains of structures that had existed since the universe began. Of the 18 who had attempted the ceremony, 11 survived. Marcus Chen was not among them, but his sacrifice had ensured that the barriers would hold for countless generations to come. The galaxy had been saved by a former janitor and a group of ordinary people who had discovered that they carried within them the echo of creation itself. In the years that followed, humanity's role in galactic society would be forever changed. No longer would they be seen as a young species of limited importance. They were recognized as the inheritors of the most ancient power in the universe, the guardians of knowledge that predated the stars themselves. Dr. Zeleth would later write in her historical account of these events, "We learned that day that heroism is not about having the greatest strength or the most advanced technology. It is about ordinary people making extraordinary choices when the universe needs them most." Marcus Chen was just a janitor, but he became something far greater when destiny called his name. The true words continued to awaken in human minds across the galaxy, ensuring that the knowledge would never again be lost. And in the quiet moments between stars, when the cosmic winds stirred the memories of ancient power, those who listened carefully could still hear the echo of 18 voices speaking words that held back the darkness and preserved the light for all who came after. The silence remained bound beyond the edge of reality, contained by barriers woven from sacrifice and spoken into existence by those who remembered that some things are worth dying for. Humanity had answered the call of an ancient dragon and discovered that they were far more than anyone had ever imagined. The universe was safe, and the legacy of the first speakers lived on in the hearts and minds of those who still carried the old words, waiting for the day when they might be needed again.